Delcy is going to the United States because she is following Donald Trump's orders. I mean, the Maduro supporters are being forced into submission, let's be clear, taking orders from Donald Trump, and they have to obey. We're on the right path, and there's no turning back. If they start acting funny, as we say in Venezuela, a second wave will come and they're going to vanish. That's the word. Certain people. When I say vanish, it's because not even their boots will be left. They're practically going to be erased.
Friends, this is breaking news from Venezuela. Things are happening and we're here to tell you about them. Look, the first one. Accounts have been found in Switzerland belonging to Delcy Rodriguez and Jorge Rodriguez under the names of front men. Well, the list of people beyond Maduro from the Chavista team with accounts in Switzerland is very long. If you want, I can publish the names of all of them, but it would take us several hours. They have trafficked drugs, they have trafficked oil, and they traffic gold, and part of those profits are in Switzerland. And unlike Maduro, whose assets have been frozen by Switzerland, with Delcy and Jorge Rodriguez, they have not. Those assets are still there and are not blocked for now. That could be one of the weapons Donald Trump uses to force people to do what he says in Venezuela. Something that has already been proven to be true with the release of prisoners. But pay attention because Delcy Rodriguez has requested to go to the White House next week. The same week that Maria Corina Machado will also be at the White House. I don't even want to imagine. I hope a meeting between the three of them doesn't happen. Maria Corina wouldn't give in to that. Allow me, there's a lot to explain about what's happening, and there's a military officer who's still in exile, I hope for just a short time, in Spain. Admiral Carlos Molina Tamayo, welcome.
Thank you very much, Albert, and good afternoon. And well, yes, we are going to clarify many things because there is a lot of misinformation, especially in the leftist Spanish press, which is highly manipulative. But I'm going to give you two main points and then we'll develop that further. Everything that is happening in Venezuela right now is under orders from the Trump administration towards the Chavistas, towards the Maduro supporting Chavistas. Delcy goes to the United States because she is following orders from Donald Trump. The Maduro supporters are being subdued by force. Let's be clear. On Donald Trump's orders, and they have to obey. And they've already been told clearly, if you don't obey, a second wave of attacks is coming, and that second wave is going to be lethal. Because they don't have to capture anyone, but rather eliminate them physically. Along those lines, right? The clown Jorge Rodriguez, who yesterday said that thanks to the efforts of Zapatero, Sanchez, and Lula, that's a lie, that's a deception. It's an order from the Trump administration that they must release all political prisoners in Venezuela. So the credit for all of this. The armed wing of the United States of America, which has been a great ally to the Venezuelan cause of freedom.
That is to say, all those who go around saying that Trump has committed a crime and only wants oil should start apologizing, right?
Absolutely, but they twist and manipulate the information a lot. The United States intervenes against Maduro and his narco-criminal group because they are a threat to the United States of America. That's the reason. Because of the three issues we always talk about: drug trafficking, sending criminal and psychopathic offenders to the United States, and the relationship with Hezbollah, the Ayatollahs, and so on. That's the reason for the intervention by the United States against a narco-criminal group. And now what Trump is saying is that since Delcy and her group, because it's not Maduro anymore, Delcy and her group of criminals are stealing the oil. I'm going to manage the oil. I, Trump, am going to manage the oil, and I'm going to bring peace to the Venezuelan people because I'm going to manage the money and not you who steal it. It's that simple.
Of course.
So with that money, What I understand is that there's going to be a mini Marshall Plan in Venezuela to provide supplies, infrastructure, healthcare and sanitation, etc., to the Venezuelan population during this transition period. So the United States is not stealing the oil, and listen to this carefully, global leftists. Cuba was the one stealing it. Russia, China, and Iran. Stop lying. And that thing about international law, that's a fallacy. International law is meant to help the people, not to help a group of narco criminals. And you are invoking international law to defend Maduro. No, invoke international law to defend the Venezuelan people, which you haven't done for years. For years, Maduro has been massacring Venezuelans.
I couldn't agree with you more, Admiral. If Maria Corina Machado goes to the White House next week, it's by Trump's order, and if Delcy goes, that's by Trump's order too. What could happen there? What orders could he give to either of them? What information do you have?
Well, he's not going to give Maria Corina Machado any orders. Maria Corina Machado is going to coordinate a mutually beneficial relationship with the United States government. Because Maria Corina Machado, who is the undisputed leader of Venezuela, and together with Mr. Edmundo Gonzalez, have always agreed with the United States. So let's look at it that way. Maria Corina Machado and Trump are partners in Venezuelan democracy in a win-win relationship. The United States wins because the threat of Maduro's narco-terrorism and his henchmen is removed.
Admiral, something happened. I think this would be a good time to clarify it. There was a bad relationship between Maria Corina and Trump. Maria Corina visited Biden once. The CIA sent several people to talk to her, and she didn't want to meet with them. And then there's a character here who I think is dangerous, a guy named Grenell, whom you must know, who is in Donald Trump's administration. And I've been told that he works more for the interests of the oil company Chevron than for defending the United States. And of course, if people like that get involved in this relationship, they can muddy everything up.
I agree, Grenell didn't give me a good impression either, but let's remember that we have a great ally, which is Secretary Marco Rubio. Secretary Marco Rubio can't be fooled, and Secretary Marco Rubio knows Maria Corina Machado and knows that the country under the leadership of Maria Corina Machado, I'm referring to Venezuela, will be a great ally of the United States. That's why I say that between the Trump administration and Maria Corina Machado, there is an excellent relationship, and there has to be, because they agree, there is convergence on all points. Now, in the case of Delcy, it's that Delcy is an adversary. Delcy is a human rights violator. Delcy is a mafioso involved in the theft of Venezuelan oil. I read a report somewhere about some so-called Calais brothers who have stolen billions, trillions of dollars. So Delcy goes to the United States, and let's not fool ourselves, she's not going there to negotiate. She's going to receive instructions from Trump. I mean, they're not in a position to negotiate. They were already defeated with that action of capturing the kingpin Maduro. They are in a submissive position, and what they're going to do is receive instructions, and the only thing they can respond is, yes, sir. They just say, yes, sir. That's all they can respond. Let's be clear about that.
It's important. Well, there's a friend, a confidential source in Venezuela. We have many who, despite the persecution, the threats, having their phones checked, will they still keep sending us messages. I'm not going to give his name. C. Let's call him that. And it's a summary of how the situation is. Let's listen to him.
They have more technology, much more weaponry. We're not prepared. People were returning the rifles that were handed over voluntarily. People don't want to know anything about it. People don't want to fight. What happened in Caracas was pretty ugly. We were neutralized. All the strength we had to respond didn't work. They shut down the entire electrical system, took down the radars, took down all the iglas. People were scared. Only one person grabbed an igla, and when he fired it, the drone immediately detected him, and well, they killed them all with a single bomb. Here in the 23rd of January neighborhood, there was someone here who acted tough, fired that thing, missed, and the drone came back a little later and dropped the bomb, and well, it blew up half of some areas here. Approximately 100 military dead. And it was true because it was just 8 helicopters and 20 men who killed 200 men. Well, 32 with a single blow, a bunch of presidential honor guards and some civilians. And there were only 20 of them, but the weapons they had, those were weapons that fired more than 300 bullets per minute, man. Those were weapons that the guys used so fast they had something that made me spit out. I was bleeding from my nose. I didn't even know why. It was a whistle that sounded all over Caracas and made people bleed from their noses, from their ears. We couldn't move. That whistle immobilized us. They say it's what they call the sonic shock wave.
It's curious that this friend says people are turning in those weapons that were absurdly handed out to civilians, thinking they were going to go out and defend the drug lord. But there's a lot of fear. The militias are still around, trying to intimidate the people, and above all, Diosdado Cabello is still free. Why? Why haven't they just gotten rid of him yet?
Well, this is a process, a cancer that has infiltrated all the institutions in Venezuela for 26 years, right? And eradicating that, of course, takes time. The head of the cancer, which is Maduro and his accomplice Flores, has already been cut off, and little by little it's coming apart. But let's remember that Diosdado was saying not a single drop of oil to the United States 2 days before last Saturday's intervention. And now he's saying that, well, now there's a relationship and an agreement between the Venezuelan government and the United States on oil, right? They change so quickly and are so hypocritical. Now, regarding that delivery of weapons, I saw some videos. They're brand new AK-47S, let's put it that way. And they're not the AK-103 assault rifles, which are the ones officially used by the Venezuelan armed forces. When democracy returns, we'll have to find those responsible, because it's a crime to be handing out weapons of war to criminals so they can kill innocent Venezuelans. They still have the illusion that they're in control. They're not in control. They have to surrender unconditionally, and President Trump made it clear to them, if you don't follow the instructions I give, a second wave of attacks is coming. And as I said before, that second wave of attacks won't be about extraction. It will be about physically eliminating the main bosses. Eliminating the main bosses if necessary. Of course, the underbosses will immediately obey. But Delcy Rodriguez and the psychopath Jorge Rodriguez are more skilled than Diosdado Cabello, because they're street bullies, but when they want to be, they're diplomatic bullies, so to speak. And they know that for now they don't have it. A price on their head or an arrest warrant from the United States Department of Justice. They know the information I have is coming to them, and they will try to cover it up so that they can get out unscathed and hand over power. Not because they want to, but because they are being forced to. That's the reality. Narco-terrorists can only be controlled by force. You don't negotiate with narco-terrorists. With narco-terrorists, you show them lethal military strength, and you sit them down to tell them what they have to do and that they have to obey.
And I understand that they're also protecting Delcy because the cartel will want to eliminate her just like they wanted to eliminate Maduro, right? Someone has to protect her so she can be useful, and when she stops being useful, they'll take her to the United States to the same prison. That's the plan.
Yes, well, and let's also keep in mind that both President Trump and Secretary Rubio, they have a group of advisors, a group of analysts. Both the National Security Advisor and the Secretary of State have strong analyst teams. And they recommend, of course, the courses of action based on the objective. The objective is to remove the cancer of narco-terrorism from Venezuela, and they recommend the best way to do it, to avoid deaths of innocent people, both on the United States side and on the Venezuela side. And I think they're doing it well, because they're neutralizing this cancer in a way that so far, the ones who have died have been those Cubans who deserved it for invading Venezuela. And unfortunately, a few poor sergeants, lieutenants, and soldiers who were in the wrong place at the wrong time, because really those lower ranking personnel shouldn't have to pay for the crimes of the narco-terrorism bosses. So they are diffusing that, getting a transition underway, and then moving into democracy. And there, of course, it's a great relief that Maria Corina Machado is going to the United States because of that question they asked Trump. I'm not sure about it. I think he confused her with someone else because that kind of language doesn't really match with Maria Corina Machado. And I think this was a misunderstanding because what I saw was that he said she's a great lady and that she has changed. She has changed.
Tell me, have you received the final death toll? They tell me there are more than 200 military personnel dead, including the 32 Cuban escorts. Have they given you an exact number?
More or less a similar number, 217. But with this regime, you can't believe anything.
Right.
That number seems forced to them because for them, I mean, what happened to them is a huge disgrace, a humiliation to that narco regime. Besides, it created a paranoid psychological effect, paranoia cubed, because they're all scared. They realized that the most highly trained personal protection group of the Cuban communist regime was wiped out. Wiped out in a relatively simple way. Not a single Delta Force operative died. Everyone else fought. There was a 67-year-old colonel there who's a hitman, a colonel who is an expert in contract killing, an expert in defending tyrants. And they were physically eliminated in just a few minutes. So this is a hard blow for the Venezuelan regime and for the Cuban communist regime that they are now removing from Venezuela.
We started with the good news that more than 400 political prisoners have been released, but there are still another 400 left, and making it clear that Rodriguez Zapatero had nothing to do with it. In fact, he was the one who put them in prison, something that many of us here in Spain are well aware of. Zapatero is currently at a crossroads, and a judge from the National Court has opened proceedings against him for alleged money laundering, drug trafficking, and belonging to a criminal organization. Here with us is the lawyer who made this possible, Javier Perez Roldan. He told us a few days ago why.
Of course, there's this idea in the public imagination that you can't file complaints against a prime minister or a former prime minister. Well, that's one part of it. And on the other hand, of course, these issues are often difficult to prove with evidence. Why have we filed it now? Because from the moment Maduro was detained, from the moment the United States a few months ago declared that the government, was a narco-dictatorship, and finally detained him. Of course, since Zapatero has directly worked with that government, he has been a necessary accomplice to a narco-dictatorship. So now the evidence for a court to open a criminal investigation, is much stronger. First of all, he wasn't doing it for free. That is, he was getting paid, and that payment didn't come from the government of Spain or the Kingdom of Spain or anything like that. That payment was for his involvement, not from the government of Venezuela. Then we'll have to see if it's a gold mine, if there are other types of compensation. That's the first part. The second part is this. Indeed, he has acted as the official representative of the government of Venezuela, both managing all kinds of agreements, international relations, and above all, most seriously, whitewashing the government itself. We all know that the last elections, not just the most recent ones, but for many years now, the elections really have been rigged. Maduro has not won any of them. And yet Zapatero, who was acting as an international observer, came and validated them. So, of course, a government that is a narco-dictatorship that can stay in power by pretending to win elections. If the international observer, who has the duty to ensure that the law is upheld, ends up falsifying, lying, so that the government can continue, it becomes an essential element for Maduro to remain in power and therefore to continue his criminal activity. What about Zapatero's daughters? Zapatero's daughters start a company and suddenly that company becomes very successful. It's a company that deals with advertising and intermediary services. Couldn't it be, as we state in the complaint, that it's nothing more than a cover to launder money, pretending to provide a series of services and getting paid in return?
The complaint has been filed. I've been assured that he's pulling strings everywhere, even in the United States. to keep himself from being included in an investigation, not from here, from the United States, which worries him the most. And at the same time, they tell me that he's already being investigated in the United States, and not just now, but for a while. What's going to happen with Zapatero? Because the possibility that he gets away scot-free, as we say in Spain, that nothing happens to him because he's a friend of Delcy, seems disgraceful to us.
Well, first of all, in the United States, there's a clear separation of powers. And if there's a judge investigating that, the lobbying or influence peddling Zapatero engages in won't be able to counteract that. And also, Zapatero is very nervous about what's happening in Venezuela because he knows that if we restore democracy, all the files will come out about the alleged irregularities in the relationship between the government of 21st century socialism and Zapatero. And I have verbal evidence from some deputies when they were at the Santo Domingo meeting a few years ago, where Zapatero really was, he wasn't a referee between two sides, he was part of one side. He was part of the Chavista Madurista side, and he practically harassed the opposition side so that they would accept what the Madurismo wanted to impose. So he has never been impartial. He has always been biased in favor of the Madurista regime. And about those political prisoners, that's a fallacy. Political prisoners were released yesterday and will be released in the coming days by instructions and orders from Washington to Delcy. It's that clear. So neither Lula, nor Petro, nor Sanchez, nor Zapatero have had any influence on that. Because if it were up to them, I mean, if Maduro hadn't been caught on Saturday and President Trump's orders to Delcy Rodriguez hadn't come into play, those people would still be in prison. I mean, forget about that. Forget about Zapatero and Sanchez. This is about pressure and force, and that's why the Maduro regime is giving in. And we've been saying this for years. Venezuela can only be freed with military muscle from allied countries. Otherwise, things would get worse for Venezuelans every day.
Last message, and I would like it to be positive because Venezuelans all over the world who are watching us are on a roller coaster. Suddenly, there's the joy of seeing Maduro in jail, but then they put Delcy in power. Now they can breathe again because of the release of prisoners. There are more reasons for hope than reasons to think otherwise, right, Admiral?
Of course, I'll give you a chess analogy. We have the king, who is President Trump, and we have the queen, who is Maria Corina Machado. And we have a pawn, who is Delcy Rodriguez. Okay, it's that simple, that simple. Democracy has already won this. Since Saturday, something many people hadn't believed in for years. Personally, I've been promoting the idea that the only way the United States will help us is by showing the US government that Maduro's group is a threat to their security and defense, and that's been proven. And within that king and queen, we have some bishops and knights. They are Senator Marco Rubio, Peter Hesek, Maria Elvira Salazar, Rick Scott, and Jimenez. In other words, we have a group of Republican hawks in Washington who are not going to turn their backs on us, and this process has already begun. You could already say that starting Saturday, we are in transition. I know we're desperate to return to Venezuela, to democracy, but well, it's been 26 years, so a few more weeks or months won't make much difference. Look, I would also like to go back. I haven't been back in years. I've been away since 2002. I think I'm the officer who's been in exile the longest. I had to leave in May 2002 because otherwise they were obviously going to kill me. And have faith, Venezuelans. President Donald Trump is very effective against communists. He hates the communists. Secretary Marco Rubio is anti-communist. He hates the communists, and they are going to help implement democracy in Venezuela. And we have our leaders, Mr. Edmundo Gonzalez and Mrs. Maria Corina Machado, who are aligned with the United States government. Don't be misled by misunderstandings. We're on the right path and there's no turning back. If they start acting funny, as we say in Venezuela, a second wave is coming. and they're going to make certain people disappear. That's the word. When I say disappear, I mean there won't even be boots left. They're practically going to make them vanish. It's that simple and that clear. The second wave, if they don't obey President Trump's order, it's to physically eliminate Padrino, Diosdado Cabello, Delcy, Jorge Rodriguez, and a few henchmen. So let's have faith. Let's have faith that democracy is already returning to Venezuela. Thank you very much, Albert.
It's a pleasure, as always, Admiral. Long live free Venezuela, and if you allow me, long live free Spain as well.
Also, it's just that we're connected, Venezuela and Spain. When the regime in Venezuela falls, and that will help bring down the Chavistas in Spain, who are Sanchez and Zapatero.
Admiral Carlos Molina Tamayo, a pleasure as always. A big hug. We'll keep reporting.
That's right. The saga continues. Greetings and thanks to all.
Castillon Confidential by Albert Castillon.